Hello and welcome to the Deep Dive Perspective. We live in dangerous times and it's just got a whole lot more dangerous. Donald Trump has done what everybody didn't really want him to do, except, of course, the Israelis. He's decided to bomb the so-called nuclear facilities of the Islamic Republic of Iran, therefore signaling that the Americans are now actively at war with the Islamic Republic of Iran. We ask, how dangerous can this get and what could go wrong? Basically, with a world war potentially looming, global economic meltdown potentially on the horizon too, if the Iranians decide to shut down the Hormuz and attack oil fields around the region. What has motivated the Americans to do this? Why play such a dangerous game? All of these issues and more will be unpacked in today's Deep Dive Perspective. Do like, share and subscribe to our channel. And I'm going to introduce two guests. Today I've got João Jordão from Lisbon, journalist and keen political analyst and very knowledgeable on the issue of Iran in particular. And also in the studio, I'd like to welcome Aghileh Djafari, a political activist, Iranian by birth, and very much, of course, has a vested interest on a personal basis in what's going on today. So I'm going to start with you, Aghileh. Tell me, it's been bad enough, I guess, from an Iranian point of view, to have Israel starting an unprovoked aggression, which we saw Iran respond to with a kind of a pretty firm response. Ballistic missiles and drones have been flying at Israel, and vice versa. Israel itself has continued shelling civilians. The last count I had was something like, well over a couple of thousand Iranian civilians injured, hundreds killed, even hospitals bombed. And this is where we're at after Gaza and after what Israel had been doing there. We seem to have set this new convention where civilians' lives are not sacred at all. So your reaction, first of all, to this feeling that you might have about, people that in Iran being bombed right now.
Thank you for this opportunity. I think it's more important to focus on the Iranian people in general and not just my family. It is the anxiety, the level of distress, all of it. It's a mixture. It's a mixture of emotions, and it is a really, really difficult time. And because the internet has been cut, people outside of Iran are really struggling to get in touch with their families. So if we get one message from one member of family saying so-and-so is okay, we feel really privileged that day. And it is really, and this applies to everybody. I'm meeting Iranians who are incredibly distressed and they are really worried about family. But one thing that I would like to emphasize is the plight of the elderly and people, particularly with physical disabilities. So in Iran, we don't have a massive institutionalized capacity for rapid response. So most of my family have left Tehran already, and they are in reasonably safe places, whatever safe means in Iran right now. But there are many, many people who are looked after by informal networks of people and neighbors and so on and so forth. If you have terrible disability, a physical disability, how are you going to travel from one end of the country to another end of the country to survive? It is a dreadful, dreadful situation. And it is about one country's ambitions, about the region, and that one country only. And it is, honestly speaking, I come from a background, I am a political refugee. I have for all the years that I have lived in country, I have wished for this government to disappear. But this is not about the Iranian regime. This is about the sovereignty of the Iranian nation, and it is absolutely to be condemned by everybody. Not to mention, this is the first time in the history of non-proliferation treaty that someone has gone against that. To bomb a nuclear facility, this is almost like the sanctificants. It is what else is there? I mean, that's it. This means the rule of law of order is over. That's it. If it wasn't over after Gaza, if it wasn't over after Lebanon, if it wasn't over after Syria, this is done. We are done. We now live in the Wild West, and it's official. And now we live in a country where children are hungry, where NHS is falling apart, and our PM is talking about Iran's nuclear ambitions. The Iranian regime has not had any nuclear ambitions since 2002. I'm sorry, is this okay? Because
yes, absolutely. And you express your view as you see it. They
have not had any nuclear ambitions since 2002. They have stuck to the letter of the law as far as the non-proliferation treaty is concerned since 2002. Before that, I'm not going to pretend they didn't have nuclear ambitions. This is actually true. It's a matter of record. But this is not about nuclear ambitions of Iran. This is about it. So Syria and Lebanon, it was about the Greater Israel Project.
Right.
But Iran is not about that. Iran is about something more complicated. Israel has always been threatened by Iran, and this is trying to weaken Iran as a country, not the Iranian regime, but generally weaken Iran as a country because they see Iran as a threat.
Well, Aghileh, let me hold you. That's been a fascinating start. And João, of course, there are variations of political opinion within Iran. There are principalists, there are reformists. There are people who are still perhaps pro-Shah. There are those who are part of the MKO who've wanted to destroy Iran from within for a very long time and funded by the Americans. And there are those who are very pro the Islamic government as it stands as well. Iran is a religious democracy. It seems that there's a dialogue and a debate going on. It now seems to be reflecting, even in our conversation here, you have people who aren't necessarily in agreement with the government and what it does and its makeup. Yet even they, João, seem to be absolutely adamant that actually this is absolutely against the interests of the Iranian people. The Shah of Iran's son would probably beg to differ because he actually seems to, or his son has been saying, yes, Israel and America should go ahead and bomb Iran some more. So there's some really fascinating views and opinions from the Iranians themselves and a real variation. But what's your overview of the global situation? Why did Trump order this? What sense does this make?
Mohsen, first of all, thank you so much for the invite and for the question. Let me just begin by saying, I think we can all agree, regardless of what we think or don't think, we can all agree that the Pahlavi dynasty is so pathetic. Seriously, like sitting in your home in America, begging for your own country to be bombed. It's so pathetic. I think that the first thing I'd like to touch on, and as you know, Mohsen, I've had a lot of Iranian friends, as you were, and I've been in the Iranian circles for quite a long time. I was honored to actually go to Iran to participate in a conference. This was a month ago, literally. I was 5 meters away from the president with a lot of key figures from the clergy and the state right next to me. That could have been a place that could have been attacked. I think there's one key point that I like to touch upon. When people look at Iran, and just as you have, when you look at the variety and plethora of different opinions, I always like to touch on this. If I looked at Iran, as you know, I make no mistakes about it. I make a very, I'm not ambiguous about my position. I have an almost inverse opinion to the majority of people, including a lot of people in Iran, when I look at the Iranian state, because I think they're the absolute vanguard, not only when it comes to international solidarity, women's education. 70% of the higher education students in STEM in Iran are females. That is to say, the main point of attack that people use to attack Iran is actually something that they do better than anyone, if anything. But there's one thing that I like to touch upon is that if I were to look at Iran and I saw that the 90% of the Iranian people were in full support of the Islamic Republic, I would lose respect for the Iranian people. Why? Because that is precisely the point. What people see as a sort of weakness in Iran, which is that a lot of people in Iran effectively don't like the Islamic Republic. This is really just a reflection of the cosmopolitan, ultra-intellectual nature of the Iranian people. I always say this, and people can be a little bit think I'm exaggerating, but if you calculate for the last 3,000 to 5,000 years, the people that have demonstrated the biggest capacity to be pound for pound, potentially the most intelligent people on the face of the planet, it's the Iranian or Persian people. I like to touch on this point. You know how sometimes people talk about the supposed Arabian golden age of, let's say, 1,100 years ago? There was no such thing. There was the Persian Islamic golden age, where 70 to 80 to 90% of the best Islamic thinkers, they were all Persians. Ibn Sina, Persian. Ibn Rushd, Persian. Al-Khwarizmi, Persian. And so this variety of opinions within Iran is nothing other than the inevitable reflection of the huge intelligence of the Iranian people. There will be debate, there will be contradictions, there will be paradoxes, because they're that intelligent. But as we've just gathered here today, and as your wonderful guest Aghileh just said, regardless of whether you like the Islamic Republic in its terms or don't like, these attacks have obviously had an immense effect of one, having, which would have been predictable. Anyone who knows anything about Iranian history, in 1980, I believe it was, Saddam Hussein, Arab nationalist Saddam Hussein, attacked Iran, and they expected the country to collapse. Instead, what happened is that people rally behind this sort of, I would call it a Persian sort of patriotism, where people say Persians tend to unite around the flag and also the government in a way when they get attacked, and they are most certainly right now under a horrific attack. But there's one point I'd like to touch upon, and this, I think, has been such a gross, huge, among all the miscalculations that the West has engaged on, stemming from their extreme arrogance, because they don't understand the intelligence of the Persian people. They don't understand how many people around the world love Persian intellectual contributions. There's one thing, and this is the point that I really like to touch upon. 2 months ago, if you looked at the state of the Islamic Republic and the Islamic Revolution and its stated aims, you would have said they're in really, really bad shape. And the reason why is because after the attacks on Hezbollah, after the events in Syria, there was a huge demoralization even among the contingent of people that supported the Islamic and support the Islamic Republic. Now, you're seeing youth all over the planet that have nothing to do with Islam sharing old tweets from Khamenei. This is crazy. I'm seeing 60-year-olds on Twitter saying, "Oh, Khamenei, I'm sorry, I wasn't aware of your game," as they share, Khamenei's tips for a successful marriage. This is crazy. People don't understand that one of the biggest objectives of the Islamic Republic isn't only to achieve betterments in higher education, which they've managed, Islamifying the Persian society, which maybe has had unclear results. But the Islamic Republic of Iran is a little bit kind of like the Trotskyist wing of communism. They want, if not international revolution, they want to spread the seeds of solidarity and irreverence. And that, so far, it seems like the Israeli attack has had a catastrophic result insofar as containing the Islamic Revolution, because precisely now what's happening is millions and millions of people around the world overnight are now looking to the Islamic Republic for not only political but increasingly almost spiritual leadership. And that's something that's really quite interesting, because that's exactly what Khomeini wanted. That's exactly what Khamenei wants. So amidst all this arrogance and all these horrific miscalculations, thinking that Iran is weak, we know the ballistic response has been way above anyone's expectations outside of Iran. People didn't know that their missiles were that good. But regardless, I think the really, really, really important point is that people are being exposed to these seemingly contradictory things, which are they're being exposed to the wealth and variety of Persian intelligence, and how Iranian people come in all shapes and sizes and colors and opinions, and it looks good on Iran because people say, wow, they are really intelligent, insightful people. And on top of that, they have an Islamic Republic, which is pretty much the only state apparatus in the world which operates, whether you agree with them or not. You can tell that they operate on a base of international solidarity. They're one of the only states which are not only out for themselves.
Okay.
And today I read this.
A lot
so
to
go
unpack
ahead,
there, João, and I've given you lots of time to be able to really build the narrative. I was watching earlier on this morning Loki and George Galloway going at it, and Loki, quite shockingly for me, said very clearly that Iran is now the leader of the world. the leader of the world in the sense of moral politics and being able to stand for justice, and that people are turning to it for some sort of sense of what the world ought to be doing, behaving internationally, as you were mentioning. But Aghileh, you've heard some of what João has laid out. You may want to pick up on some of his points, but I'm just really interested in how this notion of Iran now almost being shunted or thrust into a leadership position potentially in the world. How does that play out?
So this is the thing. I agree with a lot of what Joel says in terms of international stuff, but I fundamentally disagree with him on the nature of the Iranian regime. And, you know, what you saw 2 years ago with the killing of, that started with the killing of Mahsa Amini, that's the nature of the brutal nature of that regime. However,
Mahsa Amini, was there a British or a Western involvement?
There was not.
Is the bombing? Do you think the bombing is an extension of that regime change?
Not. No, the two things are not. But this is the thing. I really do not want any association of Iranian people's movements and stuff. Iranian people have been striving for democracy for over 100 years. The Iranian Revolution, despite popular narratives of the Western media, it was the Iranian people's desire to have freedom and democracy. Right. So this, I think Joel and I will agree on. The nature of this regime, however, we would fundamentally disagree with. I think, you know, this regime does nothing for the Palestinian people. It does nothing. If you read...
No, you call it a regime. Let me take you up. This is a Western, definitely a Western media narrative.
No, it's not a media narrative. It is my narrative.
Let me put a few questions. I mean, you put some very controversial things. The reality is that PSYOPs by the MI6 in Iran has not stopped since 1979.
I don't disagree with that. I don't disagree with that. But the regime, for me, regime is something that if you're not conducting democracy, if you're a theocracy, if you're imposing a particular view of Islam on the Iranian people, then I call you a regime. But can we move on from that? Sure. Because what I would say is, at the moment, and this is something that, I'm sorry, João also picked up on.
Yes.
In order for people like me to fight to get rid of this, you don't want to call it a regime, whatever it is.
I would argue it's a religious democracy and that there are reformist principles within a framework. Rather like the West.
I don't think that's my personal take. I would fundamentally disagree with that. But this is not the issue at hand.
Right.
And Iran needs to exist before we can have democracy in Iran. If Iran disappears, and this is the broader aim of Israel, they might not succeed in it, and hopefully they won't, but that's what they're looking for.
Right.
They are looking for balkanization of Iran, weakening Iran in the first place, and then secondly, balkanization of Iran. And you hear the noises everywhere. You see Erdogan from Azerbaijan talking about whatever. But as far as what is really interesting, and I think the focus of this conversation needs to be this current attack, because Joel and I, and you and I, are never going to agree on the nature of this regime.
It's still good to have that. It's good to have that discussion.
It's really important,
but maybe not the right time.
This is not the right time. I think what is really, really important currently is that Iranian people need to live. The Iranian nation needs to exist. And can I just ask Joel and anyone else who speaks about Iran, at least don't play into their hands. There is no such thing as Persian. There are Persians in Iran, there are Kurdish people in Iran, there are Arabs in Iran. We are all Iranian. We are under the flag of Iran. We are under the map of Iran. We are all Iranian. And it's really important. It is enormously important not to call Iranians Persians, because, for instance, as my mother is from Azerbaijan, my father is, I suppose, nominally Persian. So I do not necessarily think of myself as Persian. I think of myself very clearly as Iranian. So that's really important. But what I would say about somebody has just recently described him as an adult child from LA, which I think is a really stupid adult child in LA, which I think is actually a really dismissive thing to describe a child, because this man, for 44 years, he has not done anything. He has never worked a day in his life. He has never had any. He has never had
the son of the Shah.
Yeah, he has not had any formal education. I mean, he's had education, but who knows what exactly? He has not done any for 44 years. Anything particularly useful in his life. Now, who knows? He's having some sort of a end-life crisis, because he's not particularly young either. End-life crisis, wanting to go back to Iran. And he was shocked that when he started telling the Iranian people to go and in the streets and welcome the Israeli bombs or the American bombs and whatever, shock, horror. The Iranians decided, no, thank you very much. We would quite like to keep our country together. Yeah. And I would agree with Joel on that. The Iranian people, above all, we are Iranian. Yeah. And the majority of Iranian people can actually agree on this. This is a position. My father was in prison under the Iranian regime for over 5 years. He's an 80-year-old man, and he was discussing the other day, I want to go in Iran to see if a war breaks out so I can fight. And we're all laughing. We're like, yes, that's quite useful. I don't think an 80-year-old, you would be more of a hindrance than so this is where Iranian people are. There's no love lost between him and Ayatollah Khamenei. Sure. However, Iran is a separate entity to any government, any regime, or whatever it might be. And if you look at the tweets that this puppet of the West, who does nothing without getting permission from Israel and America, does, is that his tweets that he tweeted before and after cutting of the internet the number of likes and shares did not share. What does that tell you? It tells you that Iranian people are not engaging with him. There's like 100 people or bots of whatever outside of Iran who are supporting him. No one else is supporting him, because our fundamental issue now is keeping our nationhood. Our territorial integrity has been attacked and illegally attacked, and this is unacceptable, and it needs to stop.
Well, absolutely, riveting narratives, and I'm enjoying the cut and thrust of it, because this is getting to the heart of the issue. There are no black and whites necessarily, and it's lovely to see that the Iranians are so nationalistic in this sense, because it's not just about nationalism, Joe. You talked about internationalism, but upholding the international order, the rules-based order, upholding the Geneva Convention, upholding the UN Charter. Well, Iran seems to be on the right side of all of those issues, and it's Donald Trump, America, the bastions of Western democracy, which seem to be dismantling it. Now, talk me through why you think it's okay for America to exceptionalize Israel, exceptionalize itself, demonize the Islamic Republic of Iran, and to tear up all rules and basically put the whole world in jeopardy just because they say that Iran shouldn't have nuclear capabilities, without any evidence, given that the IAEA has said that Iran is more or less complying, or has complied with the NPT, is complying with the IAEA's ordinances on this. Tulsi Gabbard in the US government, the head of intelligence, who Donald Trump himself has appointed, said actually there's no threat. The Iranians are not violating any of the nuclear norms. How can you do this? Is this another one of those Bush moments? Is this Donald Trump's Bush moment, where WMDs are invented out of nowhere, and in the same way nuclear facilities are turned into nuclear bomb-making depots? Talk me through the sense of this, please.
Thank you so much, Mohsen. Before I answer that, I mean, please don't let me forget the concept that you just introduced, which is the United States of America, which, by the way, is the territory, paradoxically, on which the United Nations sits, is the one nation that is precisely dismantling all sense of order. And I really enjoyed, I think, Aghileh's initial salvo, which was precisely to look at this absolutely horrific dismantling, not only of the international order, but I think even Aghileh's concept was even, or angle, a point of analysis, which is even more important, which is it's not just an erosion of the international order, it's the desacralization of human life. We're witnessing the very concept of human life and defense of human life being dismantled before our eyes, which obviously is having its peak moment in Gaza. But before that, Mohsen, if you don't mind, I just want to really, really briefly touch upon some of the concepts. I think arguably we agree much more than what you would think. I think, for me personally, I always say that Iran is an enlightened theocracy, but it's a theocracy. But the thing is, let me tell you a really awkward story, if you don't mind. Where we probably disagree is the concept of democracy. I don't think I live in a democracy. I'm Portuguese. I've lived in the United Kingdom. I've lived in France. I do not believe we live under a democracy. We live in a representative republic. And I know for a fact, because of some very weird personal events. Let me tell you a story, you and all the viewers. When I was 25 years old, I have a blog here in Portugal called Casa das Aranhas. We released a list of 1,900 Freemasons, okay? So you'll find that the apparatuses of the West, if you really look, they're not even democracies and they're not representative republics. You will see that in the West, we're actually governed by mostly men who wear very bizarre clothing. Namely, do you know what happened to me when I released the name of men who wear aprons called Freemasons? I was threatened with death and torture. And I found out that at the university I was studying at the time, many of the people in the list were professors. If you look at, for example, Portuguese society, but you'll come up with the exact same numbers in the United Kingdom and in France and elsewhere in the industrialized world. Only about, let's say, 0.5 or 1% of the population are Freemasons. But if you look into the percentage of high-degree journalists, high-degree police officers, lawyers, members of parliament, you'll come with about 60 to 70% of Freemasons. So I think in the West, I don't disagree with the characterizations of the Islamic Republic of Iran. So my concept, and I actually went to present this concept in the global, in the 6th Global Conference of Imam Ali Reza in Mashhad in May, is that I believe that in the West, we have a system that is much more similar to Iran, except that in the West, we don't know who the theological men are. But trust me, they're there and they do govern society. So we operate in a system where if you look at the areas of your life that are actually decided upon by vote, they're very small. For example, we don't elect the leader of the Bank of England. We don't elect the leader of the ECB, of the European Central Bank. We don't elect who gets to sit in the military committees of NATO. So most of the leaders that truly decide, whether at the corporate or state level in the West, they're not elected, they're selected. And they're selected by structures that look in every way, shape, and form like the Council of Experts in Iran, which is the council from which comes the supreme leader. So the difference is that Iran is enlightened enough to tell you who these leaders are. And even, for example, you'll notice that Freemasonry, which absolutely dominates the very biggest institutions, they're mostly men. They're mostly men. They only made Freemasonry exists for 300, 400 years. They only started having female Freemasonry for about 150 years ago.
This is an interesting narrative because it ties into something I'm going to broaden this conversation out with. On the one level, people tend to focus on it's Israel versus Iran, it's America versus Iran, and that's the state level operation that we're all aware of. You've raised some deep state kind of, or deeper kind of powers that may be involved. And one of the things that I'm kind of slightly getting suspicious of is there's obviously, to me, no logic in Donald Trump doing this other than Israelis want this to happen, or Zionists want this to happen. But beyond Zionists and Israelis, we know that they're connected to a network of moneylender mafia, okay? So I'm just looking ahead. Iran responds by knocking out oil installations that are precious to America. Iran responds by knocking out US bases. Iran responds by shutting down the Hormuz. We get a 25% of the energy that comes to the world shut down. We spiral into an economic meltdown, a political and economic meltdown. Migration occurs en masse as people try to escape these areas where they can't get their supply chains sorted. We have China, which relies on oil from this region, hit hardest, and it is the world's manufacturing base at the moment. Russia can't steer clear of it, although they sort of are kind of sitting on the fence at the moment. When I paint this picture, what we're saying is it's not just an Iranian response that is going to be restricted to Iran versus Israel, Iran versus America. This is the entire planet. My baked beans tin is going to probably double or triple in price. You know, my rent or my mortgage or my house will also go through the roof. Added to the austerity and the recession that we're already facing, what are the impacts, the potential political, economic impact of what Donald Trump has done?
So, Mohsen, great question. Let me tell you something. People are always, and by the way, Tulsi Gabbard, which you mentioned, she flipped. Yeah, Tulsi Gabbard completely flipped. She turned out to be a huge sellout. She's now saying that Iran was close to having a nuclear weapon. That doesn't even the point of Iran having a nuclear weapon. And apparently, I still need to be confirmed, but I think Medvedev has come out and said that it's not really a question of Iran having the capability to develop a nuclear weapon, because there will be powers willing to give it to them if it really gets to a tragic state, which is now arriving. But let me tell you something. Iran does have, and you and I know, and people really in the know, I'm sure everyone knows, that Iran does have a nuclear weapon. Do you know what their nuclear weapon is? It's precisely like you said, the possibility of closing the Strait of Hormuz. And let me tell you why that's so dangerous. Because as you mentioned, let me just give you an image. As you know, I think it's 30 or 40% of the world's oil that goes to the Strait of Hormuz. Look at how people behaved during the pandemic. Look what they were doing for toilet roll.
Yep.
It's crazy. So I think the real danger here for the West is not so much the closing of the Strait of Hormuz, but the fact that we've built our society, again, we're eroding solidarity among people, eroding solidarity among neighbors. And if it comes down to it, everything that the West says about Iran, i.e., if we strike Iran, the society is going to collapse and I think it's much more likely to happen to us. We're more at a danger of revolting against our leaders. If the prices go up 20, 30 to 40% or even more, we're the ones who are very likely, because we live in a market society with less and less solidarity, less and less spirituality.
Let me bring Aghileh back in this.
So that could be catastrophic.
Let me bring Aghileh back in this. Aghileh, there's been something called Agenda 2030, which World Economic Forum has been pushing. It's also been something very well known within the United Nations. It's being pushed around the world. I pushed back against it. He didn't want Agenda 2030 in Iran. In fact, he personally stepped in to stop it, although Iranian civil servants, etc., were trying to get it. No, I'm not saying more.
Separate,
but what I'm thinking is, when the moneylender mafias want something done, quite often, I'm going to put it to you, that they do things by provoking situations and scenarios. By provoking Iran in the way that they have, I mean, it is a provocation, quite clearly. It's breaking every international rule that one knows in terms of this kind of scenario. Do you think there's an interest within those powers who have been running the neoliberal economy, which seems to be coming to its end? It's the notion of growth is grinding to a halt. The West is economically already losing to China, losing to the Eurasian axis. Is this a great reset? Is it just that by pulling the plug on the world, if Iran melts down the world's economy in this way, is that just playing into the hands of what those guys want anyway, like a reset, as perhaps they did at the First and Second World War, where the reset saw the Americans take over from Europe as the power in the world?
I don't feel like I know enough about this to express too strong an opinion either way. However, what I would say, I'm in general more a believer of cock-up than conspiracy.
Sure.
I believe that Donald Trump is an unstable man who backed himself into a corner. And actually, I'm not quite sure, but all the reports that are coming out is that the level of attack that was done last night was not sufficient to get rid of that facility at all. And yet Donald Trump is on Twitter making pronouncements that now we have done the beautiful thing and we are going to make peace. So, and we know that the conflict within the Trump movement, there is the MAGA people,
yes,
and there is the neo-hawks who are saying the Bible said Israel, we need to defend Israel, otherwise we're not going to defend. Can you imagine? Can I just put that out there? If, as a Muslim, I said what Quran said, whatever, and therefore I'm going to do this, can you? I will be laughed out of the building, and that's the best case scenario.
Sure.
That's the best case scenario.
Yes.
But what I would say is, I don't know. I think I'm a bit more skeptical about closing of the Strait of Hormuz, because at the moment, the Iranian people are still, because of the war, they're still sticking together.
Sure.
But there's been a lot of pressure on the Iranian people. There's been, because of sanctions, because of mismanagement of the system, we have had, cancer drugs they're not just expensive, they're impossible to get hold of with some cancer drugs. So you can be as rich as you like, you're just not going to find it. So, and closing that area will have enormous impact on the Iranian people. So I think even if the Iranian regime wanted to do that, it would be the last thing they do. I don't think it would be their nuclear option.
No.
But at the moment, to be honest, any type of prediction with what is going on is completely fool's game, because what America did last night is a complete shocker.
Yeah.
But I agree with you both in as far as I think the economy, how popular they are, whether they're going to get elected the next from one year to the next, has enormous impact. So Starmer, for instance, Starmer is a man. Look, my husband always makes fun of me. He says now we have a prime minister in this country that you hate more than Blair. He said, in my life, I never thought this would happen, but it has. We have, and Starmer, because the difference between Blair and Starmer is that I fundamentally disagreed with almost everything Blair did. However, Blair was a statesman. He had ideas. I disagreed with his ideas fundamentally. Starmer just wants to be prime minister. And this is a problem. If that's your only ambition, you will do anything. And now with the emergence of reform, perfect opportunity. Look at me. I'm the big statesman. I'm going to go to war. I'm best friends with America. So I agree with you that economy, where people are in their political life cycle, governments are in their political life cycle, absolutely this has an impact on the decisions they're making. But they are making big mistakes, because what they're underestimating. So I will tell you something unpopular. The Egyptian regime was restrained towards the people who went towards Gaza for the Egyptian regime. Not really restrained, so they beat people and so on and so forth. But we all know what these people are capable of. We all know what they did in Tahrir Square. We all know that wasn't that. And why didn't they? Because they're aware they can push their peoples so far. There is a limit how much you can push the Saudi people. There's a limit how much you can push the Egyptian people, Jordanian people. They didn't accept Donald Trump's deal of accepting Gazans, not because they're all of a sudden humanitarians, but because they know what the consequence for their long-term survival will be. And the West is really underestimating this. And I agree with this bit of it completely with the two of you. Even as an Iranian, I tell you, I am shocked at how far Iran has managed to first hit Israel, and how, the Six-Day War was exactly that. And all the Arab nations, that's it. They backed off. They
lost within 6 days. And here's Iran on its own.
And on its own, when it has been under sanctions for many, many years. And actually, as an Iranian opposed to this regime, what I need to remember is that you don't underestimate your enemy or whatever. And that's something that Israel really played badly. They both underestimated the intelligence of the Iranian people to realize, and Iran needs to exist. First of all, and Iran needs to exist for Iranians to rise up. And also, a lot of young people who were severely beaten, went into prison, all sorts during the last 2 years because of the movements, are coming out on Twitter very vocally. They are saying it's not your business what we do with our regime. Right. It's our business. We are Iranian. We will deal with this. This is an internal matter. Right. What is happening is external, and we are standing to defend our nation. Well, and that's the bottom line of it.
Well, absolutely fascinating. We could run with this, Joe. We're coming to the end of the program, so I'm going to give both of you a chance to make some conclusive remarks. João, you first. Aghileh raised the very important issue of the neighbors of Iran. Iran has pushed something called the Hope Initiative to try and make the neighborhood comfortable and feel safe, and to say, look, we deal with our regional problems. We don't need an America or a Russia for that matter, or a China. It's the regional neighbors who have to sit down. And even Ayatollah, from the time of perhaps maybe President Rouhani, to now, that process has been pushed. Not even Ayatollah Raisi backed off from that. We're now at a stage where the Arabs, who have been essentially puppets and proxies of America, who are milked for oil, they are the cow that Trump says he milks, and he's just done it again a few months ago. They have a choice, don't they? They either continue to be in the pocket of America and prepare potentially for oil refineries on their territory to be destroyed, because those oil refineries and the US bases that are dotted around in all of these proxy puppet Arab dictatorships are now targets. They're legitimate targets for Iran. What do you think is going to happen? Do you think the Arabs are going to be running to the Americans to calm this down, to stop this getting any further? What role can they play? They have a lot of money. They have a lot of interest in that region. What should they be doing, and what do you think they will do?
So one thing is for sure. I think in regards to the neighborhood, I think I always say that to one side. So Iran is flanked by either side. By states that are inherently that have been destabilized and even destroyed to a certain degree by American aggression. So on one side Iraq, another side Afghanistan, which makes the incredible advances that Iran has made all the more incredible. When it comes to the, let's call it the greater Sunni world, I always talk about geographically Iran as the Iranian wedge, as it were, because if you notice, there's like this big massive Sunni countries on one side, big massive Sunni countries on the other, and Iran is kind of like the passage between one and the other. So its geopolitical importance is only growing, and it's almost like decreed by geographical reality and now augmented by political events. I think what is happening now for sure, well, what I suspect will happen is what's happened, for example, with, I mean, I could talk about different institutions in the Muslim Sunni world. I could talk from Erdogan, the leader of Turkey, to 5 Pillars in London. Do you remember how 5 Pillars were all enthusiastically supporting the HTS Al-Qaeda takeover of Syria? And now they're almost pretending like they support Iran because they're having to. They've been put into a corner. Well, now they have to celebrate the fight back of Iran against Israel. So what is for sure is, I think the leaders, you can expect the leaders, not least because, let us be very clear, Iran is much, 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 much more democratic than UAE, then Qatar, then Saudi, then, so even if you don't see Iran as being very democratic, which indeed it's not, it's certainly much more democratic. They get to elect a president, much more so than the UAE, Qatar, and Saudi. So what we know for sure is that, for example, UAE, Qatar, and Saudi, they're going to continue to, unfortunately, act on behest of their monarchies, and those monarchies, you can rest assured, are way too dependent on the United States of America. I mean, look at the absolutely disgraceful visit of Trump, with that disgraceful kind of honoring of a man who's pro-genocide, and then showering him with billions of dollars. So I think you can expect the hypocritical stance of these states to continue. Why? Because on one side, they're more and more dependent on America, but on the other side, their populations are more and more looking to Iran for inspiration and fight back in honor and dignity. It's as simple as that, because the Gaza genocide has humiliated and terrorized the 400 million Arabs and 2 billion Muslims all across the planet, because it's told you, basically, we're going to live stream a genocide where you are the victims. And obviously people feel like they need someone to stand up for them, even for the least bit of. So this contradiction is only augmenting, right? So the people of the UAE, the people of Qatar, the people of Saudi are definitely, and the people of Turkey as well, which is more like, it's a democracy-ish, are obviously more and more looking to Iran for leadership. I think what will definitely happen is that these political leaderships are going to have to, and it's already happening. If you look at Turkey, Erdogan, he's being much harsher, even though obviously he's very hypocritical, but he's being much harsher in his characterization of Netanyahu. He's now saying he's terrible, he's worse than Hitler, etc., etc. But economically, these countries are so dependent on the United States of America that I think we cannot foresee for the immediate future them joining in any degree of real solidarity with Iran.
Okay.
But I think what will happen is this: it's going to be bubbling underneath the surface. The populations of the world are going to be more and more begging for more Islamic unity, and this by itself can only be a good thing. So we need a sort of, I think the attack of Israel has miscalculated the extent to which their vicious attacks on anything and everyone that is Arab and then Muslim, because they're not just attacking Arabs, they're attacking Muslims, of course, because Iran isn't majority Arab. I think they're pushing, it's almost as if in a way, they're making the unthinkable thinkable, which is more union, more cooperation, be it economic, military. I mean, Iran mentioned recently, they publicly mentioned their will to build a so-called Islamic army with Saudi Arabia. They mentioned a few other countries. I think it was Saudi Arabia, Turkey, being the main ones, and they mentioned a couple of other countries. And this is now becoming thinkable. So I think this we can expect
some interesting possibilities. Anything seems possible. The Samson option, Aghileh, can be an option as well. It's something the Israelis have almost like a pipe dream of maybe destroying the whole world if they can't keep their beloved promised land, which they robbed from the Palestinians. Now, that Samson option would mean nuclear weapons. It would mean that for the first time, the possibility of nuclear weapons dropped on an Iranian population is there. And Iranians, of course, would have to be thinking about wiping out Israel. Tel Aviv, etc., none of it would exist. This is literally one of the scenarios that we're looking at. Your final thoughts, it's a morbid one, and it's one that we pray it doesn't even come into the heads of these psychopaths, but you can't tell after what they've done in Gaza. What do you see happening? Just a minute or two in conclusion from you.
To be honest, I really don't know, and I really hope that Israel somewhere, somebody in Israel who loves Israel, who would fundamentally disagree with me on everything, has some sense to realize that this is a war that is really bad for Israel. I mean, of course, that is really bad for the Iranian people. That's a given. But it's also fundamentally really bad for Israel. And the issue is, Iran is a vast country and Israel is a small one. It's a really small one. There isn't anywhere to run away, unfortunately. There's a lot of places that Iranians can... So there is, all of those things, all of those geography stuff does come to importance when you're in a war like this. But can I just say, for my last thing, what I want to ask my Iranian brothers and sisters is that all of you, so I think we all share the love for our country. We all want Iran to be well. We all want to be together back in Iran, to live in peace and harmony. And a lot of us really would like this regime to disappear for good. But look at Syria, look at Iraq, look at Afghanistan, look at Libya. This kind of regime change, intervention, whatever you want to call it, it's not only does it not bring democracy, but it's also not planned to bring democracy. And the best case scenario that we can think of for Iran, if this carries on, it would be 20 years down the line, something like Iraq. Is that what we want for Iran? Is that genuinely what we want for Iran? We need to stick together. We need to be against this illegal attack against our statehood, and that's the most important thing. And we just need to make sure that our voices are heard in the West, put pressure on our MPs in the UK. Can I just say, I have started personally calling my MP every day, very politely, not rudely. He's a government minister. His name is Gareth Thomas. He's in West Harrow. He's an MP for West Harrow. I call him every day. They now don't answer my calls, but I leave a long answer phone message telling him giving him updates about my own personal family situation. And then at the end, I have told him that there are members of my family who are applying who are thinking about through Turkey applying for asylum. And given that he's pro-war, I'm absolutely certain that he will be supporting their asylum application.
Wow.
So please do this. Please make sure you use everything at your disposal. We don't know what might trigger that pressure.
Well, Aghileh, thank you so much. Absolutely fascinating arguments and really well put. João, you too, fantastic contribution. It's not a black and white situation. There are nuances in most political issues. In this one, there is absolutely a nuance in terms of what the Islamic Republic of Iran is and what the Iranian people want or don't want. They will, as we've done in this show, obviously express that most vigorously. But what there isn't a nuance in, it seems, is that Western American imperialism absolutely wants to resource rape. It absolutely wants to dominate West Asia. It absolutely wants to impose forever wars on that region. And all of it is fundamentally to simply keep their power and to keep people subjugated in that region. As long as that happens, as long as that attitude of Western imperialism is maintained, there will be no peace, because there's no justice. And I'd leave that in people's mind that Iran certainly is seeking justice, and I would say at the moment is on the right side of history in every way, shape and form on this particular issue. Whatever your agreements or disagreements with the Islamic Republic of Iran's establishment, the reality is on this issue, they are absolutely on the right side of history. Do like, share and subscribe to the channel, and we're going to continue this series of discussions so we get to know more about the reality of what could actually cause every one of our lives some real serious problems if we don't get these things resolved in a way which is civilized. Thank you for watching. Do like those buttons of sharing and subscribing. Goodbye.